Good afternoon and evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the Biomed webinar on allergies, getting to the root with biological medicine. This webinar is going to be presented by myself, Heather Schofield. I am a homeopath and the education director with Biomed, and I'm really excited to be talking about allergies since it is that time of year. Plus, in addition, not only helping to deal with allergies from a symptomatic perspective, but also really getting to the root and helping people work through and resolve their allergies and allergic tendencies. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so allergies. What are allergies? And in the health field, especially the natural health field, this is something that we are very familiar with and deal with, especially at this time of year. And so allergies are generally an overreaction of the immune system to harmless substances. 25% of Canadians suffer from seasonal allergies, and the statistics are also the same for the U.S. When we're talking about types of allergens, there are a number of different types, and tonight we're going to be focusing on inhalation allergens. However, you've got contact allergens like poisonous plants and pet dander, pollen, and latex. You've got things like injection that can come from medication or bee stings, ingestion, so medication, food, nuts, shellfish, and then finally the inhalation allergic reactions that are caused from things like pollen and dander, dust, and mold and mildew. When we're talking about the spring allergens, because this is the springtime, pollen from trees is usually what starts from March to June. The West Coast, so Vancouver specifically, tends to start getting the pollen starting earlier than the central provinces and the East Coast. And still the East Coast deals in March with cooler weather, so the pollen hasn't started yet. However, pollen from trees is one of the biggies, and birch and alder tend to be really big culprits in people reacting to pollen. And then you've also got oak and maple and box elder. And then as you get further into the season, you get pollen from grasses, and so this tends to be more mid-May to mid-July. And then you get ragweed and other types of pollens more into the fall. Other types of spring allergens that pop are mold and mildew, especially with the temperatures changing, dust mites, and pet dander and pet fur. Here's a nice little map of allergens across Canada. So you can see on the West Coast, again, it's lots of trees. Birch and maple and alder are there through the mid-provinces and then through the prairies. So in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, it tends to be grasses that are the problem. And then you get into the East Coast, and again, it tends to be trees again and tree pollen. That is really the springtime issues. So to understand the allergic reaction within the body, there's a first exposure to an allergen. And then the B cells, once this exposure has happened, the B cells will start to proliferate and differentiate into plasma cells, and they secrete IgE antibodies. The IgE antibodies then end up binding with the mast cells, and this now sensitizes the mast cells to this allergen or this potential harmful invader in the body. When you then have a subsequent or a future exposure to that same allergen, and we can use birch pollen as an example, then the mast cells that have the IgE bound to it release inflammatory molecules, and then you get resulting allergic symptoms that come into play. The types of symptoms that these, and we're talking again inhalant allergies, the types that reaction that we type to see, and these are things that we see in clinic regularly, are things like sinus inflammation, blocked sinuses, or runny nose, runny or stuffy nose, sinus infections, blocked eustachian tubes, which can cause problems in the ears, can cause ear infections and ear congestion and ear itching, a sore, scratchy, itchy throat, eye inflammation, which can be runny eyes, itchy eyes, red eyes, conjunctivitis, And then moving down into the bronchial and the lungs, you can see asthma and inflammation happening there. And so with the asthma component, that allergies can create a reaction, the natural killer cells and the cytokines are released when there's an exposure to an allergen, and then that creates inflammation, and then the inflammation has the bronchioles inflame up and fill with mucus, which then causes difficulty in breathing. So getting to the root of the allergies then, and getting to the root of allergies, there are a few different ways to think about how to deal with this. And so tonight we're going to be talking about getting to the root of the actual allergies, not just symptomatic relief, but where do the allergies come from? Why is the body reactive? And what was the potential original source that's creating this issue? And so blocking histamine or avoiding substances is often very common practice. It's not really addressing the root cause. Allergies, they're not just a reaction to allergens, but rather a symptom of a deeper problem. And that deeper problem is a severely compromised internal milieu. So that's a pretty big mouthful, severely compromised internal milieu. So let's actually talk about that and what that actually means. For those of you that have been working with Biomed and Biomed offerings of the products that we have, whether it's more recently or it's, for years and decades, you'll be very familiar with the fact that we talk lots about the milieu, we talk about the terrain, we talk about acid-base balance, Sanum and biological medicine all have a big component to dealing with the milieu. And so getting to this disturbed milieu is going to really allow the body to get back into re-regulation. So that's kind of the essential reasons why we're going to be talking about this. So a perfect recipe for allergies. The perfect recipe for an allergic and reactive body is a disturbed milieu. And the disturbed milieu and what we're talking about, it really means you've got acid-base imbalance, or the body is over-acidic. You've got a burden on the immune system, an overburden on the immune system. And we'll talk about exactly how this actually potentially happens and then becomes this overburden. You've got altered mucous membranes in the intestinal tract, which can create leaky gut, which means that proteins and allergens can get into the body and systemic and create reactions. A disturbed intestinal flora, so the flora and the fauna and the healthy microbes are really important to keeping the milieu well balanced. And then in addition to that, you can have exposure and buildup of toxins, heavy metals, mercury, and then potentially hand in hand, you've got mold and candida that all goes with that. So this disturbed milieu picture, it's not just one thing or another. There's a whole bunch of aspects that work with it. And when you're working with biological medicine, these are often a lot of the main points that you're looking at to help with getting people back into a healthy, regulated place. So the disturbed milieu is related initially to the immune system. And the primary causes of an immune overreaction, so an allergic reaction, actually can often go back to childhood. And so what do I mean by that? Well, Dr. Thomas Rau and Dr. Konrad Wertmann, they're both forefathers in European biological medicine. They also are very much experts in pleomorphism and milieu therapy and working with Sanum products and Sanum protocols. And so Dr. Wertmann, he is passed on now, and so he leaves all of his research and knowledge as a legacy for us. And Dr. Wertmann was a pediatrician in Austria. And so he saw through practice that children, when they were exposed to primary antigens, and these primary antigens are food proteins, often, if these were going through our genetic and ancestral lines, they're the first foods that are introduced during the first 9 months of life. And things include like cow milk and chicken eggs. Those were the two biggest culprits. And so this idea is that these first foods that we're exposed to in life can actually become primary antigens, which are causing the initial burden on the immune system in the intestinal tract. If somebody then has reacted to these food proteins, then secondary antigen sensitivity can start to develop. And so there's secondary antigens and secondary things that can trigger the person then. And so this includes some other foods that aren't classified as primary antigens, like soy and nuts and citrus, but then it also includes all the other things that the body tends to react to from an allergic perspective, like the things that cause seasonal allergies and pollen and dust and pet fur and those types of things. And so a secondary allergy, as I mentioned, seasonal allergies often can be a bigger symptom of a deeper problem. And so in this way, there's secondary sensitivities due to the primary allergies that have hit the intestinal tract and disturbed the milieu. A healthy mucous membrane should have healthy microvilli and villi, microvilli. And so this creates a huge surface area for absorption of nutrients and all the other things that get absorbed by the intestinal tract. When there's been an exposure to these primary antigens and damage from the primary antigens, then you end up with this atrophic mucous membrane, or the villi and the microvilli end up getting destroyed. And so you create less surface area, you create more leaky gut scenarios, and then it can lead to a whole other host of symptoms. In Dr. Wortman's books, he talks about these hidden indications of intestinal allergies. And so as you can see from this list, there's a huge number of things and a huge number of categories. Since we're talking about allergies tonight, the hidden indications of intestinal allergies show up as respiratory and skin conditions. So in infants, sniffling, and then as we continue on with bronchitis and asthma, hay fever, allergies, sinus problems, sneezing attacks, chronic coughs. And then in the skin condition category, in infants, cradle cap, and then including neurodermatitis, dermatitis, eczema, vitiligo, acne, and all kinds of rashes. And so again, going back to Dr. Wortman, his whole idea and how he worked and practiced was that if you saw these types of conditions in a patient or these types of symptoms, it was a bigger indicator that there was intestinal disturbed milieu going on. And the idea is then to treat the gut, which we'll talk about as well. Okay, so just understanding the gut in more detail. So you've got three major components that are really important for the intestinal tract and for regulation in the body, and also for keeping the milieu or the terrain very healthy. And so these components include the mucous membranes, the Peyer's patches, and the bacterial lining. For the mucous membranes, of course, this creates a major defense system and a protective barrier, and it really does help with immunity. The Peyer's patches, they are these patches that reside in the small intestine, and they include up to 80% of the adult immune system. They're the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. So the Peyer's patches are actually extremely important for immunity. If a child is been exposed to and reacted to primary antigens, let's say cow's milk and eggs, then what can happen is the Peyer's patches start to get destroyed, or they get overburdened, and so you get this intestinal the immune system in the intestinal tract gets overburdened, and then what you start to see is increased tonsillitis, increased sore throat, bigger susceptibility to infections, asthmas, and different things. So the immune system is then trying to find other places in the body to be able to function. And so tonsillitis, according to Dr. Rao, is also then an indicator that the immune system is actually in an overburden in the intestinal tract. So just a point to kind of file away. In addition to that, we are going to be talking about a remedy that contains Peyer's patches. So we have a solution for you. Okay, and then finally the bacterial lining. And this offers resistance to growth of bad bacteria. It helps to decrease inflammation in the gut. It helps with kind of policing and making sure everything is running really well. And then there are studies and links to show that when you have a decrease in intestinal flora, it can be correlated with chronic illness and allergies as well. Okay, so let's continue on here. So talking about the internal milieu. And so with the internal milieu, how to actually restore it into a healthy way. With the constituents of the gut, the mucous membranes, the Peyer's patches, and the bacterial lining, how do we keep these healthy and get the internal milieu, which is a big part, the gut is a big part of that, back into restoration and regeneration and regulation? So the types of things to look at with restoration are restoring gut flora, restoring the mucous membrane lining, and this can partially be done through diet. It can also be done through NAG or N-acetylglucosamine and L-glutamine. It can be done with probiotics. It can be done with acid-base balance. It can definitely be done with different essential fatty acid oils. And the other part with this restoration is boosting the immune system. And part of that is helping support the Peyer's patches for regeneration, and then probiotics and acid-base balance also have a big part in immune system boosting as well. Then the next thing we want to consider, again back into the intestinal tract, is regeneration. And so one of the ways to regenerate the actual mucous membranes is, of course, remove all the food allergens and all the triggers, because that would then just create another load on the intestinal tract. And so removing food allergens and then giving the time for the cells and the organs to strengthen and regenerate. And so other things that can really help with that, of course, are including healthy oils and through diet and through some supplementation as well. And then finally, regulation. So this is getting the body back to regulating itself. And so you need to get the blocks for regulation removed. And so detoxification through organ detoxification, supporting the liver, the lungs, the kidneys, the lymphatic system is really important. And then detoxifying other things like heavy metals. Deacidifying, so that means getting the acid-base balance back under control. And then enhancing hormonal and cellular metabolism. And so things that can help with these types of things are alkalizers and acid-base balance, detox remedies, digestive enzymes. There's some standard remedies that are organic acids, Pleocitro and Pleozanavis, which actually really support cellular metabolism. And then, of course, diet is a big part of this as well. Okay, so that's just a general overview. If you're looking for more information about this, we do have other archived webinars that include lots of information about the milieu and how to promote a healthy milieu and to detox and drain and do all of these things. So this is just a quick overview. In relation to allergies, a healthy internal milieu is really important, because if it's disturbed then or disrupted, the body's just going to be more reactive overall. Okay, so types of therapy options for allergies. And these are just general type options that are available. You can use antihistamines, whether they're prescription or over-the-counter, or herbal or other supplemental components, allergy shots, and there also is some desensitization type techniques you can do working with practitioners. You can use a neti pot to help flush the nasal and the sinus passages, and what this does do is it helps to wash out any potential allergens that are lodged up in the nasal and sinuses, and helps stiffen mucus. Using HEPA filters and indoor AC can be really helpful for people who have a lot of sensitivity to dust and mold and pet dander. Avoidance, of course, is a therapy option. Sometimes it can be hard to avoid everything. And then finally, Dr. Mercola really promotes provocation neutralization allergy testing. So that's the one aspect of therapy options. The other part, what I call root cause therapy options, is really looking to get deeper in the body and get the body back to regulation and to get the body less reactive overall. And so these are things including the diet, acid-base balance, drainage and detoxification, using probiotics, and helping to support the gut or repair the gut. So now we're going to start actually talking about these types of therapy options as well. And so addressing allergies, this is a formula that works really well. You're helping patients with symptomatic relief. The symptomatic relief is important. And the reason it's important is because if you're working with clients and you're treating them on a deeper level, but they still are experiencing running, itching eyes, then they may not work and be so compliant. So you want to be able to offer a twofold thing. One is offering the symptomatic relief so that they can get through their day-to-day life and get through allergy season. And then you want to work on the deeper underlying causes to get them healthier and re-regulating in a much better way. So the symptomatic relief to start with, looking to remove or avoid triggers or different allergens. Strengthening the mast cells so they're not so likely to degranulate and excrete histamine, and then finally help to decrease the histamine load overall in the body. And so with the strengthening of the mast cells and decreasing the histamine load, then the allergy symptoms are going to be experienced in a much less symptomatic kind of way. Then in addition to looking at that symptomatic relief, the milieu therapy includes the diet, acid-base balance, intestinal mucosa, microorganisms or flora and fauna, and helping with the digestion and digestive function. And so symptomatic relief, we have a number of options from Biomed that are highly effective and work for many patients in a very timely fashion. Of course, with symptomatic relief, you want quick relief, and so we have some options here that are going to help with that. So Allernest, it is our #1 allergy formula. It is a Nestman product, so it comes from Germany. And what it does is it works like a natural antihistamine. So it has effect within the day, and sometimes people have to take it 2 or 3 times a day, and they're able then to cover themselves for the entire day and reduce their allergy symptoms. So what it does is it has antihistamine effects. It helps to decrease the hyperallergic response. It reduces inflammation, and it helps to strengthen the cell walls. When taking it, people experience relief within 20 minutes. So it's a really nice formula to help relieve allergic symptoms during allergy season. And so, of course, it can be used during seasonal allergies and environmental allergies, and Allernest also does work for food allergies as well. So it's not just limited to the inhalant allergies, but also all types of allergies. Acutely is 10 drops in water every 15 minutes, and then generally 10 drops in water 3 times a day. And then we've also got broncha. So if you have clients that are having a lot of bronchial, lung, respiratory type symptoms with their allergies, then broncha would be a good one to add in. You can use Allernest and broncha together. Broncha is a herbal formula and well documented from decades of use to really help with lung and bronchial support. It works a little bit like a bronchial dilator, so it helps to open up the airways for breathing. It loosens mucus up. It's anti-inflammatory. It helps to calm cough reflexes down. And so when we're dealing with allergies, if they are respiratory in nature, then that's going to really help to relieve those types of symptoms. And then we've got Hydrastis nasal drops or Hydrastis nasal spray. And so Hydrastis nasal spray is great for sinusitis, for the sinuses, for the nasal passages, for chronic rhinitis or any sort of inflammation or irritation, and it's really great for allergies as well. You spray or spritz up inhale, so you get it up into the sinuses, and it helps to decrease inflammation. It helps to get secretions moving within the sinuses, and it also helps to prevent drying out of the nasal mucosa membranes and helps to normalize breathing. So there's a lot of stuff that happens with it. The one thing to remember with the Hydrastis nasal spray is sometimes when clients are first starting to use it and they spray it up, they may feel a burning sensation. That burning sensation is an indication that there's actually inflammation happening. And so it is a good sign because it means that then the Hydrastis nasal spray is going to be able to help reduce that inflammation. It's also another way to flush out the mucous membranes in the sinuses and the nasal passages to remove allergens as well. And one of the tips from Dr. Andreas Marks, who happens to be a Nussman and drainage expert, is for those who fly or have clients that are flying and they have a tendency to get sick after they're flying due to the recycled air in the airplanes, you can use Hydrastis nasal spray to keep the mucous membranes moisturized, and then it really helps people prevent actually getting sick. Okay. And so next we're going to talk about loofah tabs. So this is specifically for sinusitis and sinus inflammation. It is a tablet that goes under the tongue, and loofah, as a loofah sponge, is a very well-known German European remedy to help with sinusitis. So there is a direct connection with using loofah and sinuses, or with sinusitis. It helps to decrease inflammation, and it really overall just helps with controlling sinusitis-like symptoms. And then we've got one other very specific allergy product called Allergies. So Allergies we talked about, and the Allergies is the one that's working for reducing histamine reactions. And then Allergies, it works a little bit differently. This is not exactly like a over-the-counter natural antihistamine. Instead, it does a few different things. It helps to block histamine from binding on the tissues. It helps to reduce pain. It has a very powerful antioxidant to help reduce histamine production. It stabilizes the mast cells, the walls, so that the mast cells are less likely to secrete the histamine out or to dump the histamine out and create a reaction. And then finally, it helps to decrease inflammation. So Allergies is really working to strengthen the mast cell walls and to help block histamine from binding to the tissues or to the mast cells. Okay. And then finally, we have one other component that is very important to talk about, and that's vitamin C. And vitamin C has a very specific role when working with allergies. And so with the vitamin C, it works again like a natural antihistamine, but what it does is it helps to break histamine down, and so have less histamine overall in the blood, and it helps to reduce the actual histamine that's in the mast cells. And so you end up getting an inverse reaction where the more vitamin C you take, the less histamine will be in your system overall. And of course, vitamin C is an amazing anti-inflammatory as well. So what I would recommend in all of your allergy patients to be taking minimum 3 grams of vitamin C every day. This is going to help them be less reactive overall. Now, this whole category we've just talked about, these are the remedies and formulas that are going after symptomatic relief. The top in there are the Allergies for working symptomatically to reduce the histamine reaction, the Allergies, which is really great at strengthening cell walls, decreasing histamine overall, and then vitamin C, again, is reducing histamine within the blood, and so it's making people less reactive. And vitamin C is also very important for the immune system. So, and then we're going to go at the very end. I've got some protocol recommendations, and so all of these things I'm just talking about now are also within that protocol. Once we get beyond the symptomatic relief, then we need to start looking at getting closer to that root cause and getting the body back into regulation. And so then we have the milieu therapy component of working with people with allergies. And so the first thing to talk about is the diet. And this is beyond just products and supplements. If we want to help people go back to restoration and regeneration of their internal milieu, of their mucous membranes, of the intestinal tract, then they really need to be able to eat and eat in such a way that they're going to be promoting this for long-term health. And so this diet that, again, is from Dr. Wortman and Dr. Rao, it's a real purposeful way of eating for long-term health. And so basically what you're doing is you're looking to remove all potential allergens and acidifying foods from what you're eating on a daily basis, and that allows the intestinal tract, the cells in the intestinal tract, to start to heal. It allows the mucous membrane and the mucous lining to regenerate. It supports the bacterial flora, and it takes less strain, or it takes a strain off the Peyer's patches, which is the immune system. And through this eating, then, you can actually really heal the gut. In addition to that, any other things that you're recommending for your clients is going to be able to work better, because you're not, once again, over and over and over putting a big burden on the intestinal tract. This diet, so just a few more things to mention about it. And if you are interested in learning more, again, we have a webinar that is in our webinar archives that is specifically about the restoration and regeneration diet. So it gives a lot of detail about why you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, what does it involve. So right here, we're just doing a quick overview and bringing it back to allergies and how we can help patients with allergies. So it's low in protein, mainly plant-sourced. It's a very alkaline diet, and it's meant to be a very alkaline diet. Most of the time, the body can only process about 60 grams of protein a day, and then the rest either gets changed into glucose, or it puts a big acid burden on the metabolism. And so this is designed to be lower in protein to help reduce that burden and help the body to detox and deacidify. It's very alkaline in nature. A healthy body tends to be more slightly alkaline. Mind you, that is not 100% accurate, in the sense that there are specific tissues that are very meant to be very acidic, and then there's other tissues that are meant to be neutral, and then there's other tissues that are meant to be alkaline. But just as a general overall, if we're slightly alkaline, then that tends to be where we're better in regulation. The diet is also free of food allergens, including cow dairy, because this can cause congestion, inflammation, and put a burden or impair the immune system. And it's also really high in omega-3 essential fatty acids, because this helps to enhance cellular metabolism, cellular membranes, and it allows for better oxygenation of the tissues. It helps support the flora, and then the healthy flora will manufacture more omega-3 and omega-6 in the actual gut. Okay, so ins and outs, what to include, what to actually eat. And again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this specific slide, just to point out that it's here. You can keep this for your reference, and then also know that we do have it in more detail on a archived webinar. And so the biggest thing is to remove the heavy meats, dairy, eggs, specifically chicken, and any potential allergens like shellfish and nuts and citrus and histamine-rich foods, and all processed refined sugars and preservatives, yeast-containing foods, and white flour products. So then you might think, okay, well, what am I supposed to eat? And definitely you're going to get that kind of question from a patient, especially if they're used to eating a lot of meat and potatoes or meat and rice. So you're going to include almost all vegetables, leafy or otherwise, lots of avocado, seeds, nuts if they're not allergic, or if you're able to do the testing to determine what they're allergic to, remove those out. Lots of oils, olive oil, grapeseed oil, coconut oil, sunflower, flax are all really important. Rice, some beans and legumes are okay if they can digest them. Organic soy for some. I know in Europe this is a lot more prominent than in North America. Seaweed, whole grains, goat and sheep dairy, fruit and fresh squeezed juice before noon, white meats like chicken and turkey, and fish a few times a week, lemon juice and vinegars, lots of water, and lots of herbs and spices. Okay, So those are the types of foods to be avoiding and to be including in the restorative diet. And then finally, here's the last bit to mention about this, is it takes the cells, different cells and different organs take different time periods to regenerate. So following this diet for 6 to 12 weeks allows for the major regeneration of the cells in the body, including the intestinal tract and the gut flora, which is really what we're aiming for. It excludes the primary antigens, so cycling back to talking about the primary antigens, which is destroying the villi and the microvilli in the gut and putting a burden on the Peyer's patches. So while we exclude the primary antigens, which is cow products and chicken eggs, this allows the body to start rebuilding the mucosa and the intestines. And it helps to restore the immune system. And so you're increasing the body's natural production of IgA to reduce leaky gut. And then finally, it's helping to naturally detoxify and deacidify. If you're looking for more instructions on how to do it, we do have this book available called The Swiss Secret for Optimal Health, and this was written by Dr. Thomas Rau. It is written on how to actually implement this diet, and it is written so that patients and lay people can also read it and follow it. A number of us here at Biomed have actually done this diet for 10 days and for 2 weeks. And 5 days. So there's a few options on how you can do it. And it's a really kind of healthy, basic way of eating. And I've known a lot of people by following this type of diet and then doing a modified version once they're over the main chunk can really start to feel a lot better. This is also the types of things I recommend with my own patients because I think the diet is also extremely important when we're dealing with a whole variety of health issues. Okay, so let's then start talking about alkalizing. So once we've talked about diet, and next is alkalizing and allergies. And there is a big connection. An acidic terrain is prone to inflammation, and it's prone to allergic reactions. And so therefore, it's really important that we address the acidity part or the acid-base imbalance part to help reduce people reacting and help reduce inflammation and therefore help overall reduce allergies and allergic type tendency. So pH is helping us measure how much hydrogen ions are in the tissues, and we want to flush the excess hydrogen ions, which is classified as acidity, out of the body. You need to use different buffering minerals to do this, and specifically sodium bicarbonate and potassium bicarbonate are really important. The sodium-potassium pumps on the cell membranes takes the bicarbonate into the cells, and then it becomes raw material to help form enzymes from the pancreas, bile from the gallbladder, and hydrochloric acid in the stomach. And through all of these processes, we're improving digestion, but then we're also helping to decrease this burden of excess hydrogen ions, which is causing acidity in the body. When you're measuring pH, there's a variety of ways to do it. Ideally, there's something called BTA or BETA, which is biological terrain analysis, and this uses blood, saliva, and urine for this complete picture. Many of us are not able to test that way, so then the next best way, if we're trying to look at the tissues and what's going on within the tissues, is measuring urinary pH, and that will indicate how well the body's excreting hydrogen ions or acid from the body and how burdened the tissues are. For the actual measurements, so first morning urine, if it's below 6.5 pH reading, then it indicates tissue acidosis. Tissue acidosis is acid stored in the tissues. If you're measuring for the rest of the day, then below 6.8, again, indicates tissue acidosis. Ideally, you can take an alkalizer essentially at any time of the day. The optimal times are 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. because this matches with the pancreatic circadian rhythms. However, with that said, it's not always very practical for patients and clients to be doing that. So often in the morning and in the evening or at night are the best times to be, next best times to be taking an alkalizer. The most important thing when taking an alkalizer is always do it with warm water and on an empty stomach. Warm water is going to allow the pyloric sphincter to open sooner, so the alkalizer will bypass the stomach into the duodenum. And then on an empty stomach means it does not actually interfere with digestion. And generally, people have to take an alkalizer for about 3 months, and this mechanically shifts all the acid out of the body, and then continue to follow up with an alkaline diet. So that's a general kind of art of alkalizing. We also have 2 different alkalizing webinars archived on our website under the education section. So if you need some more detail about alkalizing, please feel free to watch those webinars. You're also very welcome, of course, to be calling in and to speak to myself with Biomed or with your account advisor, your product advisor, and your professional advisor. They'll be able to answer all kinds of questions about this kind of therapy with working with your patients. Okay, so to alkalize, then, beyond diet and beyond water, we have a number of alkalizing options. So we have the Sanum Pleoalkali powder, and it's a combination of sodium citrate, sodium bicarbonate, and potassium bicarbonate. And it is in a powder that you mix with warm water to be able to help flush the excess hydrogen ions out of the body. There also is 2 other ones from Biomed, the basic powder and the basic tabs. So these tend to be milder alkalizers compared to the Alcala. There is less sodium overall, so if there's patients that have sodium sensitivity, maybe hypertension, then the basic powder or the basic tab would be potentially the better option there. The basic tab. Also, in some cases, if people don't want to be mixing powders with waters and drinking it, then the tabs dissolve very quickly, and so that gives another option for delivery. As I mentioned before, empty stomach and warm water is really important to take an alkalizer, and they're balanced in such a way that it's going to help to move the acid out of the body. Okay, and so then the next thing I want to talk about after we've talked about alkalizing is starting to look at healing the gut. And we talked about the Peyer's patches and the fact that they're associated with this gut-associated lymphoid tissue or GALT. And because the Peyer's patches are so integral to the immune system and also so integral to the lymphatic system and so integral to a healthy, functioning intestinal tract, they are really important for all intestinal rebuilding protocols that you're doing with your patients. These Peyer's patches, so the Pleoribosan is Peyer's patch extract. It's considered an organotherapy, and it helps definitely with inflammation, leaky gut, healing the gut. It helps with allergies on that deeper milieu, disturbed milieu level. And because, again, if we're going back and we're healing the gut and not allowing the large proteins to be able to get into the blood and circulatory system, you're going to be less reactive. You strengthen the immune system so we're less reactive. And you're allowing the intestinal tract to repair. So, again, less acidic, less reactive overall. And dosing-wise, I do know that it says 1 cap up to 3 times a day. However, often in a biological medicine perspective, and from Europe, it's recommended to use 1 capsule daily or 1 capsule every 3rd day. So there's a variety of options for dosing. And the 1 capsule daily is one that actually works quite nicely when working with a protocol in rebuilding the intestinal tract. Okay, and then of course we need to talk about probiotics, the microflora. And so there's 2 probiotics we're going to talk about now. One is probiotic 7-in-1. So this is a broad spectrum 7-strain probiotic blend. It is acid stable, and so what that means is the probiotics make it through the stomach. They make it through the stomach acid and the gastric acid and the bile salts, and it allows the probiotics then to get to the distal end of the intestinal tract and the beginning of the colon to be able to start to populate and colonize. The other thing, because these specific probiotics are made in such a way that they can also withstand temperature, so therefore they are classified as shelf stable. They don't need to be kept in the fridge. They can be kept in the fridge, of course. They're very ideal for rebuilding the intestinal tract because you've got 7 strains to be rebuilding, and they're also ideal for traveling and preventing travelers, diarrhea, and different types of traveler-type symptoms as a nice protector. As far as going back to allergies, probiotics and the flora are really important to, again, help that disturbed milieu become less disturbed and better balanced and regulated. And so there are links and studies that link microflora and allergies. And so looking at children that had allergies, including eczema and conjunctivitis and asthma, they found that there was delayed composition of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus in the gut microflora, and also showing that there's specific strains of the healthy gut microbiota that allow for or reduce or regulation of allergic type immune responses. In addition to that, probiotics also strengthen the gut defense barrier and the mucous membranes, reduce the antigenic load in the gut because it gets all stuck with the probiotics. And so probiotics do play a really important role in allergies, not always necessarily a direct role with the allergic symptoms, but as that background to get people less reactive overall. And so with the bifidobacterium and the lactobacillus, you can see here in the probiotic 7-in-1, there is 2 lactobacilluses, acidophilus and rhamnosus, and then there's also 3 bifidobacterium, the brevi, bifidum, and longum species in there as well. So these probiotic 7-in-1 has some real species in there that is very good for specifically helping to boost the intestinal tract and help reduce allergies overall. We also have Lactobacillus sporogenes, or sporogenes, and it's also a bacillus species, the names are kind of interchangeable. And so this is another flora that's really important for the GI system and to help to rebuild the intestinal tract. Because this specific species also produces lactic acid, it has a really nice alkalizing effect and support of the microflora environment. And so this is another really great species that can be added in to a rebuilding protocol and an allergy protocol. All right, and then if you want to put it all together, I didn't talk so much about the intestinal kit kind of through the presentation, but since we are talking about repair, intestinal repair, the intestinal kit really does pull it all together. You have the Pleo-Alkala in here, so you've got your alkalizer, you've got the Pleo-Ribosan, so the Peyer's patch extract. In addition, I did mention about the Pleo-Sanavis and the Pleo-Citro earlier in the presentation, which are organic acids, which help with cellular metabolism and cleaning up the milieu from that deep kind of terrain, cellular, intracellular component. We didn't talk so much about Candida, but mentioned the fact that that's another picture of a disturbed terrain, and so the Pleo-Pef in the intestinal kit helps to downregulate Candida species. And finally, we have the NAG, which is N-acetylglucosamine, which is intestinal mucosal membrane repair. So the only thing I would add into this is a probiotic. And then if you're working with allergies, this is a really great combination to be able to heal the gut, repair the gut, rebuild the gut, and to really heal the milieu and the terrain as well. And so with the intestinal kit, putting a probiotic with that, and then some allergy symptom relief like Allernes or Allergies, and some vitamin C, you've got a really good protocol put together for your client that's not only going to help with their symptomatic allergy symptoms in the moment, but it's also going to actually get them less reactive overall. So down the road, when fall comes around, they are going to be less likely to have allergy-like symptoms. And then when spring comes around in 2019, they're going to be set to move into allergy season in a much better, less reactive way overall. Okay, and so I do have a protocol here that I want to go through, and then we're going to start answering some questions. So I do see that people have started typing questions into the Q&A section. Feel free, please definitely do that as we're talking about this protocol, and then we'll go through with the questions as well. Okay, so for an allergy protocol, there are two options to follow with. And so option one, if you're just dealing with acute allergy symptoms, then the combination of Allernest plus the right C is a really good combination to deal with allergies and allergic symptoms very quickly. The Allernest, as I mentioned before, works in about 20 minutes to help reduce allergic symptoms. So if you have people that have runny nose and conjunctivitis and itchy eyes and maybe a bit of a scratchy throat, then the Allernest is going to just dampen down all of those allergy symptoms for your client throughout the day, so they can make it through allergy season. There is, the dosing is 10 drops in water every 15 minutes. Once the symptoms are kind of at bay, then they can do it about 3 times a day. I would recommend that we add in the right C or the right C enhanced. With this vitamin C and getting 2.5 grams, I would say even up to 3 grams a day, 2 to 3 times a day. This is going to, again, reduce the histamine load in the cells, reduce the histamine load in the blood, and it's going to strengthen the mast cells, so they're less likely to degranulate. And so that combination is going to be super helpful for acute allergy symptoms. Then the next option is working kind of on the deeper components and some terrain work to work through allergy season to overall reduce reactivity. So Allernest or Allergies could be used. The Allergies, again, that's strengthening the mast cells. It's helping to reduce histamine overall. And so choosing Allernest or Allergies for dealing with the actual allergic symptoms is really important. And then using a probiotic, of course, to support the flora and the fauna. And then an alkalizer is also really important. An alkalizer really, truly decreases a reactive body. It reduces inflammation and it reduces allergic-like reactions overall. So the combination of Allernest plus probiotic plus basic powder or tab, or Allergies plus probiotic plus basic powder or tab is a really nice way to help somebody reduce their allergic symptoms and then get their body and milieu back better regulated. If you want to take it up a notch, or if you have a patient who's very reactive to a lot of things beyond just pollen or seasonal allergies, but also food allergies or environmental allergies or lots of different pollens, or the symptoms are very intense, then consider working deeper in the gut with something like the intestinal kit, and then adding Allernest or Allergies and some vitamin C into the mix is really going to be able to help those patients. When talking about this as a protocol overall, this is based on biological medicine, European biological medicine, and so this is decades and decades and decades of practitioners working on the terrain to be able to overall get the body in a better regulated way and then get people and patients feeling a lot better. And so it's a tried, tested, and true type of protocol to be able to work with your patients and know that you're going to get really good results with them. Okay, so with that said, what I'd like to do is go and answer some questions. So let's get the Q&A section opened up here. And I, again, invite you to type in some questions, and we'll go through the information here. So, okay, so there was a question about probiotic 7-in-1, and does it contain FOS? Our probiotic 7-in-1 does not contain FOS or fructooligosaccharides. If you want to use a prebiotic, then by all means you can add in a prebiotic using probiotic 7-in-1. There are some people who are fructose sensitive, or they're just sensitive overall due to things like candida. And so one of the big benefits with the probiotic 7-in-1 and not containing the FOS is that anybody who's sensitive to that then won't have that as an issue. Our Lactobacillus sporogenes does have the FOS in it. So if you are looking for a product that has FOS, then the Lactobacillus sporogenes probiotic product that we have does contain it. So you've got two options essentially. Okay, and so then let's go on to the next question. I will send out the slides. This is a question, I should have actually mentioned this at the very beginning. This is a question that comes up, yes, of course. There's going to be a follow-up email, and the slides are going to be included in that. It is a lot of information, and definitely because we're talking about two aspects of allergies, symptomatic, relief, and milieu components. So yes, for sure, slides will be sent out via email by tomorrow morning at the latest. And so, Lori, I don't know if you got the answer. So the fructooligosaccharides component in a probiotic is classified as a prebiotic, and so essentially it's food for the probiotic strains, and it helps for them to colonize and populate. And so that's the reason that you would have that. It's not specifically fructose, like as a sugar, it's fructooligosaccharides as a prebiotic. Okay. And there's a number of children questions here, so I'll come to the children questions in just a moment. I do want to talk about one more thing. So with the probiotics, there's one more question about that. And it's about if the probiotics are dairy-free. The Lactobacillus sporogenes product is dairy-free. The probiotic 7-in-1 is technically dairy-free. However, the probiotics are put through a freeze-drying process, and this is what keeps them stable before they get into the human body to start colonizing. And so there has to be a medium that they're sprayed on in order to stabilize them. And so there is some milk that they are sprayed on, a milk powder. However, that milk powder does not exist in the final product. And so it is on the label because it's part of the manufacturing process. However, it's not actually in the final product. So just to kind of give a bigger explanation about our probiotic 7-in-1 and the fact that final product is dairy-free, part of the manufacturing process, it is, however, on the label, so patients may ask about this. Okay. And so let's talk about the milieu for a moment. Because this is a good question. What is the milieu? What is the milieu, or the terrain? And there's a definition I really like, and it's the spaces in between the spaces. And so, of course, what does that mean? It's the spaces between the cells. It's the spaces between the organs. Between the cells and between the organs in this interstitial fluid and interstitial spaces, this is where all the communication, all the information that's going in and out of the cells is actually happening. And so this terrain or milieu is bathing all the cells in the body. And so the cells then can absorb nutrients, and they can get the signals for communication, but then they also have the ability to detox and to discharge and get information out as well. And so a disturbed milieu or disturbed terrain, that is talking about the entire body, so the interstitial spaces between all the cells in the entire body. And when that gets congested, then information is not able to pass through as easily. Nutrients are not able to get through to be absorbed properly. Detoxing just becomes a big toxic sludgy mess. I mean, not literally, but the body it becomes a lot more congested. And then it lays the groundwork for more acid, more reactions, the cells and the organs not to be as healthy as they can. So detoxing is really important. pathways like the liver, the kidneys, the lymphatic pathways, the blood pathways, the lung pathways, when you're dealing with the milieu and the terrain are super important. And then in addition to that, supporting cellular metabolism and sort of supporting the mitochondria so that they're able to function optimally, they're able to get the nutrients that they need to function optimally. That's all really part of the milieu and making sure the milieu is clean. Acid-base balance, and we talked about this lots tonight, and these excess hydrogen ions, they hang out in the milieu and the terrain and in the tissues. And so when you're working with an alkalizer, you're deacidifying or you're reducing that acid load in the tissues as well. So the milieu in the spaces in between the spaces, you want to keep it essentially as clean as possible so the body can stay as well naturally regulated as possible as well. And then that's going to lay the groundwork for much better health overall and less symptoms. Okie dokie. So then let's go. So there's a number of questions here about children and dosing. So with the dosing and younger children, and for 6-year-olds, for example, because there's a question about that, yes, you can definitely use most of these products with children. The one thing is you should, children under 12, you never would do an acid-base balance remedy. So you don't use Alcala, you don't use basic powder, you don't use basic tab. If you need to work on acid-base balance with younger children or children under 12, then you would do it through diet. You can do it through more alkaline water, and you can use organic acids like Pleocitro and Pleocyanidis. But you don't want to actually do an alkalizing with a child under 12. And with the dosing for children, 12 typically is where they would be taking an adult dose. If you're dealing with children that are 6, so 6 to 12, they would be doing half the dose, and under 6, they would be doing a quarter of the dose. You can definitely give probiotics to younger children. I would not give Allergies. Instead, if you're looking for an allergy symptom, I would use Allernest, also because it's homeopathic. It's very safe. And so 6, do half the dose, under 6, do a quarter of the dose. And you can also give vitamin C to young children. So again, kind of following that same rule for 6, half the dose, under 6, a quarter of the dose. And so I think that should answer your questions. Most of our Nestman remedies and most of the Sanum remedies are very, very safe to give with kids. And then depending on what the Biomed product is, would depend. Rubimed, which we haven't talked about at all tonight, is also very safe with children as well. Oh, so just to come back to the milieu and cleansing the milieu, 100%. If you're working on cleaning and detoxing and supporting and getting the milieu back into regulation, then by default, the cells are also helping to detox because there's actually a space where the cells can dump the toxins into. And so sometimes some of the cells need more support, but generally by cleaning the milieu, you're doing a whole body and a whole cellular detox to some degree as well. Okay, so we've got one more question here about an infant that is being breastfed but having cramping, gas, and pain. So the first big question, if the infant is being exclusively breastfed, is what is mom eating? I know that can be a pretty tough conversation with mom. However, sometimes, because through breast milk, they're still getting proteins, and so if mom's eating a lot of dairy or she's eating a lot of eggs, if she's eating a lot of onions or broccoli or cauliflower or beans, she could potentially be passing things on that could be causing the cramping, the gas, and the pain in a young infant. If the infant is breastfeeding but then also eating foods, or like the beginner foods, making sure there's no dairy and there's no eggs and there's no wheat and no soy is really, really important. So going back to things that are very, very neutral and mostly kind of vegetables and maybe things like apples or pear as your first fruits and bananas can be very helpful. An infant can definitely take a probiotic. There's lots of probiotics that are made specifically for infants, and that could be one of the things that can help with the cramping and the gas. And then massage is also really important. There's some techniques you can follow the large intestine to help just move gas and gas bubbles through for little ones. So I hope that that helps answer that question. Okay, and so then let's talk about the intestinal kit. With the intestinal kit, how many kits and how long? Those are good questions. So when I talked about alkalizing, it takes approximately 3 months to change and move all the acid out of the body. This is for somebody who's never kind of alkalized before, maybe doesn't typically eat a more alkaline diet. And it takes the intestinal tract 3 months to really turn over. So if somebody has long-term chronic gut issues, then they're going to be wanting to do something for 3 months. The intestinal kit is set up to last between 5 and 6 weeks. So in most cases, 2 intestinal kits would be really helpful to repair the gut, and then add a probiotic into the mix. Because you're going to have the right length of time for alkalizing. The N-acetylglucosamine is going to be really helpful for the repair of the intestinal mucosa. And then you've got the citro and the sanavis, the pleocitro and the pleosanavis, which is really helpful as organic acids to help detoxify. You're going to be dealing with any dysbiosis due to fungal candida species, and then the pleoribosan is in there also helping to repair the immune system from a much deeper level. And so typically 2 kits would be the length of time and to kind of cover all of this. And then there may be some follow-up with maybe some more probiotics, of course with a diet, and then if there's anything else that kind of shows up or needs some fine-tuning, then that could be as an individual remedy after the intestinal kit. Again, this kit is based on Dr. Rao's program from the Paracelsus Clinic, and so it's the test of time as far as biological medicine goes for really helping to repair the intestinal tract. Okay, and so it looks like we've got one more question. Okay, Kathy, you have typed in a question here. Do you go through the process twice or lengthen the first days and add the second part? So I'm not 100% sure what that part you're referring to. So let me know, clarify that question. You've also asked about an acid block. I didn't talk about an acid block, but essentially what an acid block is, it has to do with acid-base balance. And when the kidney tissues get very acidic, and so this isn't so much about the actual urine and the kidney function, but the actual kidney tissues, when they start to get acidic, what may happen is when somebody's testing their pH of their urine, the pH looks really in a very healthy range, but you know from the symptoms that there's no way that their pH in their first morning urine is going to be in a normal healthy range. And so a lot of chronic degenerative conditions, you're going to expect that the body's going to be more acidic because that's kind of part of the picture. In the cancer process, you don't expect a normal pH of the urine. You would expect it to look more acidic, again, because that's kind of part of the picture. And so if the urine is looking normal pH-wise, but symptoms are telling you otherwise, then there could be something called an acid block. And that means the kidney tissues are acidic and the kidneys just aren't excreting the acid out as well as they could be. And so typically what you do, there's one of two things you can do. You can stop alkalizing altogether and just hold off and use pleocitro, which is getting the kidney tissue to start releasing the acid, or you would do that for about 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden what happens is you see a complete flip, and then the urine gets really acidic. So then you know that the body's actually now excreting. So it's about an excretory pathway. or you can continue to alkalize, and then you will eventually get that flip as well in about a 2-week mark. And then it's a good idea maybe to add some kidney support and drainage like Solidago or Buco from the Nessman line, plus the Pleocitro from the Sanum line, and you're going to be able to reverse that. So I hope that answers your question. And yes, going back to when we were talking about the milieu and the cells, you're 100% right. Getting the cells healthy is definitely one of our big goals, and getting the body back into a well-regulated place is going to be very, very helpful. Okay, and so just see here in the kit. Okay, so I've got Kathy's question here clarified. In the kit, you take the first Pleos for 15 days and then the other ones. So you, okay, so basically the kit is designed in a 2-phase process. So for the first phase, you've got Alcala and Pleocitro and Pleosanavis, and then the second phase, you continue with those remedies, and you add in the Pleoribosan, the Pleopef, and the NAG. And then that whole thing, so everything in there is going to last for about the 5 weeks, and it's all dosed accordingly so that it will last out that full 5 weeks. There is in the kit, there is a chart on how to actually take the remedies and when to take the remedies, and so it is all outlined in there. And Kathy, if you've got more questions, feel free, please, to get in touch through email or give me a call, and if you have more questions, then I can clarify them for you. Okay, and then back to intestinal kit, can it be helpful for somebody with diverticulitis? Absolutely. Diverticulitis as pockets in the intestinal tract, sometimes that's a harder thing to heal, and I'm not sure that it can be healed, but what you can definitely do is reduce inflammation, get the gut really healthy, and then that will create less opportunity for these diverticuli to get inflamed and cause pain and inflammation in the intestinal tract. Okay, so with all of that said, I thank everybody for joining us tonight, and thank you so much for your interest in talking about allergies, getting to the root with biological medicine. I encourage you all to really think about working on this deep root level, and you're going to find that your patients then are going to be less reactive and less allergy symptoms overall, and then much happier. Okay, and stay tuned, and we'll meet you again with the next webinar. Take care. Good night, everybody.